This girl reveals Millionaire's wife's secret, who is shocked to discover she has been robbing him for years. But the reason for the theft will shock you even more. Comment and rate my story from 0 to 10. Your opinion is very important. And subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help. The sound of shattering glass echoed through the luxurious office of Richard Sterling's mansion in Greenwich, Connecticut, causing him to look up from the contracts scattered across his mahogany desk. It was March, and the Connecticut afternoon was unseasonably warm. At 52, the businessman had learned to appreciate the silence of his home, especially when Eleanor was out on her social engagements, which seemed to multiply each week. Richard possessed three characteristics that had defined his personality since childhood: a near-pathological distrust of people stemming from his father's abandonment at age 7, an obsession with control that led him to triple-check every detail of his business dealings, and an impressive ability to detect lies in other people's facial expressions. These characteristics had made him one of the most successful developers in the Connecticut suburbs, but they had also emotionally isolated him from almost everyone around him. The sound came from the back patio, where Eleanor often took tea on sunny afternoons. Richard rose from his leather chair, adjusting the white dress shirt he always wore, even when working from home. Routine was his refuge since marrying Eleanor 3 years earlier. She, at 38, had brought an unexpected lightness to his meticulously organized life, with her spontaneous smiles and stories about her wealthy family from Boston. When Richard reached the French doors leading to the patio, he stopped abruptly. A dirty little girl stood in the middle of the manicured lawn, her 4 years evident in her small stature and clumsy gestures. Her dark hair was disheveled, her simple clothes stained with dirt, and she held a shard of glass in her small hand. But what most caught Richard's attention were her large, determined eyes fixed directly on his. "Are you Richard?" the girl asked in a clear voice, without showing any fear or hesitation. Richard opened the door, confused. "How did you get in here, kid? Where are your parents?" "My name is Lily," she said, dropping the piece of glass on the ground. "And I came to tell you a very important secret about your wife." The word wife came out of the child's mouth with a seriousness that didn't match her age. Richard felt a chill in his stomach, that familiar sensation that alerted him when something was wrong. His years of observing people had taught him that young children rarely told elaborate lies. "What kind of secret?" he asked, crouching down to her level. Lily stared at him with a disturbing determination. "She's been robbing you for a long time. For 5 years. The words hit Richard like a punch in the gut. 5 years. That would mean Eleanor had been involved in something suspicious since before their marriage. He had met his wife exactly 4 years earlier at a charity gala in Newport, Rhode Island, where she had introduced herself as a member of a traditional Boston family. "How do you know this?" Richard asked, his voice coming out rougher than he intended. "Because I live with Grandma Connie and she works cleaning offices," Lily replied, wiping her nose with her sleeve. "She's known your wife since she was little, and Grandma cries every night because of her." Richard felt the world spin slightly. Connie. That name wasn't unfamiliar to him. There was an elderly cleaning lady named Connie who worked in the building where his construction company's offices were located. A discreet woman, always polite, whom Eleanor had fired a few months earlier, claiming that she was stealing small items from the offices. "Your wife fired Grandma because she found out the secret," Lily continued, seemingly oblivious to the impact of her words. "Grandma saw her messing with papers in your office when you traveled. She was taking pictures of everything with her cell phone." Richard's mind raced, processing this information. Eleanor really did have access to his business documents. She had the keys to the construction company and on several occasions had offered to organize papers or retrieve important contracts when he was busy. Richard had always considered this a loving gesture from a devoted wife. "Why are you telling me this?" he asked, studying the girl's serious little face. "Because Grandma said you're a good person," Lily replied simply. She said you always greeted her at the office and asked if she was okay, and because—" She hesitated for the first time, biting her lower lip. "And because I wanted to have a real daddy." These last words broke something inside Richard. The vulnerability in the child's voice, mixed with the courage of such a serious revelation, touched him in a way he didn't expect. But his analytical mind continued to work, cataloguing every detail of what he was hearing. "Where are your parents, Lily?" "They left when I was little," she said, looking at her own bare feet. "Now, I only have Grandma Connie, but she's very sad because she lost her job and can't pay the rent." Richard straightened up slowly, feeling the weight of this revelation. If the child was telling the truth, it meant that Eleanor had not only hidden her origins, but was also involved in suspicious activities related to his business. And more, she had used her position to harm her own family. At that moment, the sound of the electronic gate at the front of the property echoed through the patio. Eleanor was arriving. Richard saw the immediate fear in Lily's eyes, who took a step back. "She can't see me here," the girl whispered, looking around for an escape. "Why?" "Because she always argues with Grandma when she sees me near your house. She said that if she caught me here again, she would have Grandma kicked out of Greenwich." Richard felt a fury rise in his chest. The Eleanor he knew was kind and caring, always concerned about the well-being of others. But the woman Lily described was completely different. Manipulative, cruel, and capable of threatening a vulnerable child and an elderly woman. "Listen," he said quickly, taking Lily's small hand. "You're going to go out the back door, which leads to the street behind us. But first, tell me, where do you live?" "In the Oak Street, in the blue house with the broken gate," she replied, already heading for the exit that Richard had indicated. "Lily," he called before she disappeared. The girl turned around. "You were very brave to come here. I'm going to find out the truth about all of this." She smiled for the first time since appearing, a small but genuine smile that lit up her dirty face. "You really do seem like a real daddy," she said before running away. Richard stood on the patio for a few minutes, processing everything that had just happened. His orderly and predictable life had been turned upside down by a 4-year-old child. And now, for the first time in 3 years of marriage, he would look at Eleanor with suspicious eyes. The sound of his wife's high heels echoed through the internal hallway of the house, approaching the office. Richard took a deep breath, cleaned up the shards of glass from the patio, and went back inside, knowing that he would need to be the greatest actor of his life to not show that everything had changed. When Eleanor entered the office 15 minutes later, she found her husband exactly as she had left him, concentrated on the contracts, seemingly oblivious to anything other than work. She kissed him on the forehead as she always did, asked about his day as she always asked, and told him about her lunch with her friends as she always told him. But Richard now paid attention to every word, every expression, every gesture. And for the first time in 3 years, he began to notice small inconsistencies that he had always ignored. The nervousness when he asked questions about her family, the way she looked away when she talked about her past, and especially how she always changed the subject when he mentioned wanting to meet her relatives. That night, as Eleanor slept beside him, Richard remained awake, looking at the ceiling, knowing that his life had been divided into 2 parts. Before and after, a girl named Lily appeared in his backyard to tell the truth that no one else had dared to reveal. The next 3 days were a silent torture for Richard. Every gesture of Eleanor's, every seemingly innocent word, every affectionate smile was now filtered through a lens of suspicion that he had never used before. During the mornings, while she prepared coffee with her usual joy, he watched her discreetly, looking for signs that confirmed or denied Lily's words. On Tuesday, Richard made his first concrete decision. After Eleanor left for what she called a massage session at the spa, he drove to Oak Street, a modest neighborhood on the other side of Greenwich that he knew only in passing. Finding the blue house with the broken gate was easier than he expected. It was the only truly blue house on the dirt road, and the iron gate was visibly damaged, hanging from a loose hinge. Richard parked the black sedan in front of the house and observed for a few minutes. It was a simple building, with peeling walls and a small garden in front, where some chickens scratched freely. Very different from the sophisticated environment that Eleanor always described when talking about her privileged childhood in high-end mansions. When he finally knocked on the door, he was greeted by an elderly woman of approximately 67 years, grey hair tied in a simple bun, wearing an apron over a faded floral dress. Her eyes, despite her age, were alert and expressive, and Richard immediately recognized them. They were the same gentle eyes that greeted him every day in the construction company building. "Mrs. Connie?" he asked, removing the hat he wore to protect himself from the sun. The woman recognized him instantly, and an expression of surprise mixed with concern took over her face. "Mr. Sterling, what brings you here? I need to talk to you. It's about Lily." "And about Eleanor." Connie turned pale and looked quickly to the sides, as if someone might be watching. "Come in, please," she said, opening the door completely. The interior of the house was clean, but evidently poor. Old but well cared for furniture, walls with peeling paint in some spots, and a smell of coconut soap that indicated constant cleaning efforts. Lily was sitting on the floor of the living room, playing with improvised dolls made of cloth and buttons. When she saw Richard, the girl ran to him with a radiant smile. "You came," she exclaimed, hugging his legs. "I knew you were a real daddy." Connie sat heavily in a wooden chair, her hands trembling slightly. "Mr. Sterling, I apologize for Lily. She shouldn't have gone to your house. I told her not to meddle in adult matters." "Mrs. Connie," Richard said, sitting on the simple sofa and pulling Lily close to him. "I need you to tell me everything about Eleanor. The truth. The whole truth." The elderly woman sighed deeply, and tears began to form in her eyes. "I didn't want it to come to this, sir. I tried to solve it alone. I tried to talk to her, but what?" "Eleanor is my daughter," Connie said, her voice breaking. "My oldest daughter, and Lily is the youngest. Eleanor abandoned the family when she was 17, promising that she would come back rich to help us. For 20 years, we didn't hear from her." Richard felt as if the floor had disappeared under his feet. Eleanor wasn't from a wealthy Boston family. She was the daughter of a humble cleaning lady from Greenwich. The whole story about her privileged background was a lie. "Continue," he asked, unconsciously squeezing Lily's small hand. "5 years ago, she reappeared in our life," Connie continued, wiping away tears with the edge of her apron. "But not as the daughter I expected. She was different, dressed like a socialite, speaking differently. She said she had married a rich man in Boston and that she could now help us." "And did she help?" Connie shook her head negatively. "In the beginning, yes. She sent money every month, paid some overdue bills, bought new clothes for Lily, but always with conditions." "What kind of conditions?" "That no one could know that we were family. That if anyone asked, we should deny any kinship. And especially," her voice became lower, "that Lily could never be seen near her or her new life." Richard looked at Lily, who was playing with the buttons on his dress shirt, seemingly oblivious to the adults' conversation. A 4-year-old child being forced to deny her own sister. The cruelty of it shocked him deeply. "When did you start working in my building?" 3 years ago, sir, soon after she married you. Eleanor got the job for me, said it would be a way to keep me close without raising suspicion, but I was supposed to pretend I didn't know her when she showed up there." The pieces of the puzzle began to fit together in Richard's mind. Eleanor had strategically planted Connie in his work environment, but for what purpose? "Mrs. Connie, Lily told me that Eleanor was stealing documents from my office. Did you see this?" The elderly woman hesitated, looking at her granddaughter, who was now drawing on a paper with old crayons. "Yes, sir, I saw it. Several times. When you traveled for work, she would show up at the building at night, telling the doorman that she had forgotten something important. She had the keys, so no one suspected anything. And what did she do there? She photographed papers, sir. Contracts, proposals, budgets. I saw her once messing with your files with a cell phone in her hand, taking pictures of everything. When she saw me, she said she was just organizing things to surprise you. Richard stood up abruptly, walking to the small window of the room. Outside, the chickens continued to scratch, oblivious to the drama unfolding inside the house. His mind worked quickly, processing the implications of what he was hearing. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" "I tried, sir," Connie said, her voice filled with regret. "3 times I tried to talk to you at the office. But whenever I got close, Eleanor showed up, or someone interrupted me. And she threatened me." "What do you mean, threatened?" "She said that if I told you anything, she would have me fired and even make up a story about me stealing things from the office. And especially," Connie looked at Lily tenderly, "she said I would never see my granddaughter again." Richard sat back down, the anger growing in his chest. The woman he had loved and completely trusted was capable of threatening an elderly woman and a child to keep her secrets. "And that's why you were fired?" "Yes, sir. Eleanor said that I had stolen some small items from the office. She invented a convincing story, with details that only someone who knew the place well could know." "You believed her, naturally." Guilt struck Richard like a blow. He had believed Eleanor's word without question, firing an honest employee based on false accusations. "Mrs. Connie, I apologize. I should have investigated better." "You had no way of knowing, Mr. Sterling. Eleanor is very convincing when she wants to be. Always has been, since she was little." Lily dropped the crayons and approached Richard again. "Now, do you believe she's bad?" she asked with her childlike frankness. Richard picked her up, feeling the weight of that simple question. "Yes, Lily, now I believe." "And are you going to make her stop being mean to Grandma?" "I'm going to do more than that," he promised, looking into the child's hopeful eyes. "I'm going to find out everything she's done, and I'm going to make her pay for lying and hurting you." Connie stood up, heading to an old dresser in the corner of the room. From a drawer, she retrieved a shoebox tied with twine. "Mr. Sterling, maybe this can help you." Inside the box were old photos of Eleanor as a child and teenager, birth certificates, and most importantly, a notebook where Connie had noted the dates and times of Eleanor's nightly visits to the building. "I started writing everything down after the first threat," she explained. "I thought one day I might need to prove the truth." Richard flipped through the notebook, impressed with Connie's meticulous organization. Dates, times, detailed descriptions of Eleanor's behavior. It was a complete record of months of suspicious activity. "Can I keep this?" "Of course, sir. And there's one more thing." Connie hesitated again. "Eleanor isn't doing this alone." "What do you mean?" "She has a partner. A man who comes here sometimes when she needs information about your business. His name is Roger. Says he works in construction too." The name Roger sounded familiar to Richard. There was a Roger Ellis who owned a smaller construction company in the area, a direct competitor to his projects. In the past 2 years, Roger's company had won several contracts that Richard had expected to get, always with slightly better proposals than his. "Mrs. Connie, does this Roger have a last name?" "Ellis, sir. Roger Ellis. Eleanor said that they are close." The word close was said with a hesitation that implied much more than a simple business partnership. Richard felt a new wave of betrayal, deeper than the previous ones. Not only was Eleanor stealing information from his business, she was doing it in collaboration with a competitor and possibly having a relationship with him. When Richard left Connie's house an hour later, his worldview had been completely transformed. The woman he loved was a professional liar, capable of abandoning her own family, threatening vulnerable people, and betraying her husband in multiple ways. But now he had proof. He had unexpected allies, and most importantly, he had a motivation that went beyond his own pain. to protect Connie and Lily from the consequences of his eventual confrontation with Eleanor. That night, when he arrived home, Eleanor greeted him with her usual smile and a loving kiss. She prepared his favorite dinner and recounted animatedly about her day at the spa. Richard listened carefully, observing every detail of her performance, because now he knew that was exactly what it was, a carefully crafted performance. "Honey, you're quieter today," she commented, pouring him a glass of wine. "Did something happen at work?" Richard looked her in the eyes, seeing for the first time the cold calculator that hid behind the loving wife. "No, just tired," he replied, forcing a smile. "Maybe I should take a few days off." "What a great idea!" Eleanor exclaimed a little too quickly. "You work too hard anyway. How about I organize a little trip for the two of us? There's a charming inn in the Berkshires that I've been wanting to visit." Richard nodded, knowing exactly why she was so interested in getting him out of Greenwich for a few days. Probably Roger needed more extensive access to the construction company's files, or there was some specific operation planned that required his absence. "Sure, honey, organize everything. I trust you completely," he said, each word loaded with an irony that Eleanor failed to detect. That dawn, while his wife slept soundly beside him, Richard began to elaborate a plan. He had 2 weeks to gather enough evidence before confronting her. 2 weeks to discover the full extent of the scheme and protect Connie and Lily from the consequences. And 2 weeks to decide if there was still something left in his marriage that was worth saving, or if everything had been built on a lie from the first day. The next 2 weeks were the most tense of Richard's life. During the day, he maintained his normal routine at the construction company, but he had discreetly installed security cameras in strategic points of his office and hired a private investigator to monitor Eleanor's movements. At night, he meticulously analyzed each recording, each report, building a complete dossier of his wife's criminal activities. What he discovered left him nauseated. Eleanor wasn't just photographing documents. She had created a shell corporation called ES Construction, using her maiden name, Eleanor Santos, and was systematically diverting small and medium-sized contracts from Richard's company to her own operation. The losses already totaled more than $200,000, an amount that Richard had attributed to the natural competition of the market. On Thursday of the second week, Richard made a discovery that shook him even more deeply. While Eleanor was at another of her social engagements, he decided to rummage through her closet in search of physical evidence. At the bottom of a shoebox, he found bank documents from an account that he was completely unaware of. The account was in Eleanor Santos's name, and the statements showed regular deposits from the Shell Corporation, as well as transfers to third-party accounts. But what devastated him completely was finding among the papers photographs of jewelry that he immediately recognized. They were the jewelry of his deceased mother, unique pieces that he had given to Eleanor shortly after the wedding as a symbol of trust and love. The photographs were accompanied by receipts from a pawn shop in Bridgeport, indicating that Eleanor had secretly sold each precious piece. Richard sat on the floor of the luxurious closet, holding the receipts with trembling hands. Those jewels represented the only material inheritance that his mother had left, pieces that she wore on special occasions and that carried decades of family memories. Eleanor had transformed these irreplaceable memories into money to finance her criminal schemes. At that moment, any remnant of love that he still felt for his wife died definitively. It was no longer just about commercial betrayal or lies about the past. It was the deliberate destruction of everything he considered sacred. The following Saturday, Richard visited Connie and Lily again. The family situation had visibly deteriorated in recent weeks. Connie looked thinner and more dejected, and Lily was wearing even more worn clothes than before. The lack of income was clearly affecting their ability to maintain basic necessities. "Mrs. Connie," Richard said, sitting in the same chair as always, "I need to ask you something delicate. Does Eleanor still send you money?" The elderly woman shook her head negatively, avoiding his gaze. "No, sir. She hasn't been here for 2 months. The last time she came, she said she needed to save because you were facing financial difficulties." The irony of the situation infuriated him. Eleanor was stealing money from him to sustain her own schemes, while letting her mother and sister go through basic needs. It was a cruelty that went beyond greed. It was family abandonment in its purest form. "And how are you managing?" "I do odd cleaning jobs when I can, sir, but at my age it's not easy to find work, and with little Lily I can't be away for too long." Richard looked at Lily, who was playing on the floor with dolls made of old cloth. The child was visibly thinner, and he noticed that she carefully saved pieces of bread from the snack he had brought, probably to eat later. "Mrs. Connie, from now on, I'm going to help you. It's the least I can do after everything Eleanor has done." "No, Mr. Sterling," she protested immediately. "We can't accept your charity. We've caused too many problems already." "It's not charity," he said firmly. "It's justice. Eleanor stole from me, and part of what she stole should have been used to take care of you. I'm just correcting an injustice." Lily approached him, climbing his knees with the familiarity of a child who had learned to trust. "Uncle Richard, are you really going to be our daddy?" The innocent question touched a deep wound in Richard's heart. At 52, he had never had children, something he had always attributed to the circumstances of life and the relationships that had not worked out. But looking at that courageous child who had risked everything to tell the truth, he felt a paternal connection that he had never experienced before. "Lily," he said carefully, "I can't be your real daddy, because you already have a family. But I can be someone who takes care of you and Grandma, someone who will always be here when you need us." "That's almost the same thing," she said, smiling with a wisdom that surpassed her age. On the following Monday, Richard implemented the final phase of his plan. He had scheduled a meeting with Eleanor for 3 in the afternoon, claiming that they needed to discuss some important investments. But before that, he met with Dr. Henry Campos, his personal lawyer for more than 15 years. "Henry, I need your help with a very delicate situation," Richard said, handing the lawyer a bulky folder with all the evidence he had collected. "Doctor..." Henry flipped through the documents in silence, his expression becoming increasingly grave. "Richard, this is very serious. We're talking about corporate fraud, forgery, embezzlement. Your wife could face years in prison." "I know," Richard replied, "but I want to give her a chance to resolve this without involving the authorities. If she returns all the stolen money, cuts ties with Roger Ellis, and accepts some conditions that I'm going to impose, maybe we can avoid a public scandal." "What kind of conditions?" "That she publicly takes responsibility for slandering Connie, that she formally apologizes, and that she accepts that I take care of her mother and sister financially. Besides, our marriage is over. I want a divorce." Dr. Henry nodded gravely. "It's a generous proposal, considering what she's done. But Richard, are you sure you don't want to prosecute criminally? What she did is a crime." "I've been thinking a lot about it," Richard said, looking out the lawyer's office window. "Connie and Lily have already suffered too much. A prolonged criminal process would only increase their suffering. I prefer a solution that allows them to rebuild their lives with dignity." At 3 in the afternoon, Richard was sitting in his home office when Eleanor entered with her usual radiant smile. She wore a new, expensive dress that he now knew had been bought with money stolen from his own business. "Honey, you said you wanted to discuss investments," she asked, sitting elegantly in the armchair in front of his desk. "Yes," Richard said, keeping his voice calmly neutral. "I want to discuss the investments you've made in recent years." Eleanor frowned slightly. "My investments? But honey, you know I don't understand anything about business. I leave all that to you." Richard slowly opened the folder that was on the desk, removing the bank statements from Eleanor's secret account. "Then can you explain these regular deposits from ES Construction?" Eleanor's face paled instantly. But she quickly tried to regain her composure. I don't know what you're talking about, Richard. There must be some mistake. There's no mistake, he said, placing more documents on the table. I have here photographs of you in my office outside of business hours, taking pictures of confidential contracts. I have the records of all the contracts diverted to your shell corporation, and I have this. He placed the jewelry receipts on the table. Eleanor looked at them, and her mask of innocence finally fell completely. Richard, I can explain everything, she said, her voice beginning to tremble. It's not what it seems. Then explain it to me, he said coldly. Explain how you sold my mother's jewelry. Explain how you created a fake company to steal my contracts. And most importantly, explain how you abandoned your own mother and sister to live a lie. Eleanor was silent for a long moment, her eyes filling with tears. When she finally spoke, her voice was very different from the sophisticated woman that Richard had known. I never wanted it to come to this, she whispered. I just wanted to have a better life. Growing up in poverty, watching my mother humiliate herself cleaning the homes of the wealthy, having to take care of a little sister, when I, myself, was almost a child. I promised myself that one day it would be different. And that's why you lied about everything, your family, your origin, your identity. I lied because I knew you would never marry me if you knew the truth, she said, the tears now flowing freely. Men like you don't marry the daughters of cleaning ladies. You marry women from the same social class. Richard felt a pang of pain as he realized that in part she might be right. 3 years ago, he really cared a lot about social status and appearances, but the man he had become through this experience was different. And Roger Ellis, he's also part of this version of the story. Eleanor sobbed louder. Roger helped me set up the company. He said he knew ways to get contracts using insider information. I started just wanting to gather enough money to help my mom and Lily for real, but then you discovered that stealing was easier than working honestly, Richard completed. It wasn't like that, she protested. I always intended to return everything, to tell the truth when I had gathered enough money. But the more I lied, the harder it became to stop. Richard watched her cry, feeling a complex mixture of anger, disappointment, and a hint of pity. The woman in front of him was neither the loving wife he had known, nor the cold criminal he had imagined. She was a desperate person who had made terrible decisions and then gotten lost in a spiral of lies and crimes. Eleanor, he said finally, I have a proposal for you, a chance to correct at least part of what you've done. She raised her eyes hopefully. Anything, Richard. I'll do anything. You will return every penny you stole. You will cut all ties with Roger Ellis. You will publicly apologize to Connie for the slander you invented, and you will accept the divorce without contesting. And in return, I won't prosecute you criminally, and I will take care of Connie and Lily for the rest of their lives, giving them the dignity that you denied them. Eleanor closed her eyes, the tears still running down. When she opened them again, there was a deep resignation in her gaze. I accept, she said in a whisper. I accept all your conditions. But even as she uttered these words, Richard caught something in her expression that alerted him. His ability to detect lies, developed over decades, was telling him that Eleanor was agreeing too quickly, too easily. And at that moment he realized that the game was far from over. The 3 days following the confrontation were of a deceptive calm that left Richard constantly alert. Eleanor had been surprisingly cooperative, handing over documents from the Shell Corporation, providing passwords for bank accounts, and even calling Roger Ellis in his presence to communicate the end of the partnership. But something about the ease of her surrender continued to deeply bother Richard. On Wednesday morning, Dr. Henry called with worrying news. Richard, I need to see you urgently. I discovered something about the money that Eleanor supposedly returned. An hour later, Richard was in the lawyer's office examining bank statements that showed a reality very different from what Eleanor had presented. "She really transferred the money back to your accounts," explained Dr. Henry. "But look at these transactions here. On the same day, equivalent amounts were transferred to accounts in different banks, all in the names of third parties that we cannot identify." Richard studied the documents, feeling the familiar sensation of being deceived. "She's laundering the money?" "It seems so. And there's more. I discovered that ES Construction wasn't the only shell corporation. She created at least 3 other companies in the past 2 years, all using false identities of people who probably don't even know that their names are being used. The true magnitude of the scheme began to reveal itself to Richard. It wasn't about a desperate wife who had committed some crimes out of necessity. Eleanor was a professional criminal, operating for years a complex network of frauds that went far beyond what he had imagined. "Henry, I want you to monitor all these accounts today and prepare the documents for the criminal process. Eleanor has deceived me for the last time." That afternoon, Richard decided to pay a surprise visit to Connie and Lily, needing the comfort of the simple honesty that he found in that humble home. When he arrived in Oak Street, he found a scene that deeply moved him. Connie was in the backyard, hanging clean clothes on the clothesline, but now they were new clothes and of good quality. Lily ran through the small garden wearing a colorful dress that made her look like a normal child for the first time since Richard had met her. The transformation of both in recent weeks had been remarkable. "Uncle Richard!" Lily shouted, running to hug him with the energy of a well-fed and happy child. "Mr. Sterling," Connie said, wiping her hands on the new apron. "We weren't expecting you today. Did something happen?" "No, Mrs. Connie. I just wanted to see how you are." "We're very well, thanks to you," she replied, her eyes shining with gratitude. "Lily even started attending a private school that you arranged. She's learning to read." Richard sat in the usual chair, Lily immediately climbing his knees. "And how are you feeling about Eleanor?" Connie sighed deeply. "It's difficult, sir. She's my daughter. Even having done all those terrible things, a mother never stops loving a child, but that doesn't mean she approves of what he does." "Grandma cries at night sometimes," Lily said with her usual frankness. "She thinks I don't see, but I see." Richard gently squeezed the girl's small hand. "It's normal to be sad when someone we love does wrong things, Lily. That shows that Grandma has a good heart." At that moment, Richard's cell phone rang. It was Dr. Henry, and his voice was tense. "Richard, you need to come to my office now. I have news about Eleanor that I can't give over the phone." An hour later, Richard was again in the lawyer's office, but this time Dr. Henry was not alone. With him was a serious-looking man who introduced himself as an investigator from the FBI. "Mr. Sterling," said the investigator, "your lawyer contacted us with information about criminal activities involving your wife. But what we discovered goes far beyond what you imagined." The investigator opened a bulky folder on the table. "Eleanor Santos is not just a local fraudster. She is part of a national network of financial crimes that has been operating for more than a decade. She is what we call an infiltrator, a person trained to approach wealthy targets, gain their trust, and then drain their resources." Richard felt the world spin around him. "You're saying that our entire marriage was a planned scam?" "Not just the marriage, sir. Eleanor has at least 5 different identities and has been married to 3 other men in similar situations. In all cases, she disappeared after emptying her victims' accounts." Dr. Henry put his hand on Richard's shoulder. "The investigator told me that they have been tracking Eleanor for 2 years, but have never been able to get enough evidence until now. Thanks to the evidence that you collected," continued the investigator, "we can finally close this network. But there's something you need to know. Eleanor is no longer in Greenwich. She disappeared last night, along with at least $500,000 that she managed to transfer before we blocked all the accounts." Richard stood up abruptly, walking to the window. "So I've been an idiot since day one. 3 years of my life based on a complete lie." "Mr. Sterling," the investigator said gently, "you were not the first and unfortunately will not be the last. People like Eleanor are extremely skilled professionals. They study their victims, discover exactly what they want to hear, and build perfect personas to meet those needs. But there's one thing she couldn't fake," said Dr. Henry. "The genuine love of her family. Connie and Lily are real, and they really suffered because of her." Richard sat back down, processing everything he had heard. "What happens now?" "Now we continue the investigation to try to locate Eleanor and recover as much as possible of the stolen money. And you," the investigator smiled slightly, "you go home and try to rebuild your life." 2 weeks later, Richard was sitting in the garden of his mansion, watching Lily play with a new doll while Connie prepared lunch in the kitchen. The decision to invite the two to live with him had been natural and immediate. The large house had remained empty for too long, and now it echoed with childish laughter and warm conversations. "Uncle Richard," said Lily, approaching him with her doll in her arms, "are you sad because of Eleanor?" Richard picked her up, surprising himself with his own answer. "No, Lily, I'm sad for the time I lost, but I'm happy to have found you. Grandma said that sometimes bad people do good things without wanting to," said the girl thoughtfully. "Eleanor did very bad things, but if she hadn't done them, you would never have met us." The simple wisdom of the child touched Richard deeply. In her 4 years of life, Lily had developed an understanding of human complexities that many adults never achieve. "You're right, little one. Sometimes the most painful things lead us to the greatest treasures." Connie appeared at the kitchen door, wiping her hands on her apron. "Mr. Sterling, lunch is ready. I made that stewed chicken that you like." "Mrs. Connie," Richard said, getting up with Lily in his arms, "how many times do I have to ask you to stop calling me Mr. Sterling? Now we're family." The elderly woman smiled, her eyes filling with tears of happiness. "It's hard to get used to after so many years being treated as a servant. But it's true, isn't it? We're family now." During lunch, Lily talked excitedly about her classes at the new school, about the friends she was making, and about the books she was learning to read. Connie talked about the cooking course that Richard had enrolled her in, something she had always dreamed of doing, but had never had the opportunity. "You know," Richard said, cutting a piece of chicken, "I've been thinking about making some changes to the construction company. How about we create a program to train low-income people in construction techniques? We could offer decent jobs and help families improve their lives." Connie stopped eating, looking at him with admiration. Richard would really do that?" "I would. And who knows, maybe we could build quality, affordable housing instead of just mansions for the rich. There are a lot of people like you who deserve to live with dignity." Lily clapped her hands excitedly. "You're going to build houses for poor people, like our little blue house, but prettier?" "Exactly, Lily. Beautiful and safe houses for people who work hard and deserve something better." That night, after Lily fell asleep in her new room, a princess room that Richard had decorated especially for her, he and Connie sat on the porch to have tea. "Richard," said Connie, using his name for the first time, "can I ask a personal question?" "Sure. Don't you feel angry at Eleanor? After everything she's done, all the lies—" Richard reflected for a moment, surprising himself with his own answer. "I felt a lot of anger in the beginning. Anger, humiliation, sadness. But now I just feel sorry for her. Pity. Pity for someone who had so many opportunities to be truly happy and chose to live in a lie. She could have told me the truth about her family from the beginning. I would have loved you exactly as I do now. She could have asked for help instead of stealing, but she chose the path of dishonesty, and now she's on the run, alone, without family, without true love." Connie nodded slowly. "Eleanor has always been like that. since she was little. When things got difficult, she ran away instead of facing them. I always hoped that one day she would mature, but some people choose not to mature, Richard completed. And that's her choice, not our responsibility. 6 months later, Richard's construction company had completely transformed. The professional training program was forming its second class, and the affordable housing project had delivered the first 50 homes. Richard discovered that building for people who really needed it gave him a professional satisfaction that he had never felt building mansions for millionaires. Lily, now 5 years old, was flourishing in school and had become the light of Richard's life. Every night she insisted that he read her a story, and on Sundays they had a special ritual of making pancakes together for breakfast. Connie had become not only the housekeeper but truly the matriarch of the family. Her simple wisdom and her generous heart helped Richard navigate the challenges of being a late adoptive parent, and her cooking had become famous among his friends. One afternoon in September, Richard was in the construction company office when his cell phone rang. It was the FBI investigator. "Mr. Sterling, I have news about Eleanor." "Was she found?" "Yes. She was trying to apply the same scam to a businessman in Miami, but this time someone suspected and reported her. She was arrested yesterday." Richard leaned back in his chair, feeling a complex mixture of emotions. "And the money?" "We managed to recover about 60% of what she stole from you. The rest had been spent or transferred to accounts that we are still investigating." "And what about the sentence?" "With all the evidence we have, including the other cases, she will probably get between 5 and 8 years in prison." After hanging up, Richard sat in silence for a few minutes. He felt relieved to have a definitive conclusion, but also melancholic when thinking about the waste that had been Eleanor's life. That night, during dinner, he told Connie about his daughter's arrest. The elderly woman received the news with sadness, but also with a serene resignation. "Maybe prison will be an opportunity for her to reflect and change," said Connie. "I'm going to visit her when it's allowed." "She's still my daughter. And if she wants our help when she gets out?" Connie looked at Lily, who was drawing quietly in her new notebook. "If she really changes, if she shows genuine remorse, of course we'll help. But she will have to prove that she has changed. Lily can't grow up thinking that lying and stealing are acceptable." Richard smiled, admiring Connie's wisdom once again. "You're right, as always." 3 years later, at Lily's 8th birthday party, Richard looked around the garden full of children laughing and playing, and was amazed at the life he had built. The courageous girl who had appeared in his backyard to tell a painful truth had become his daughter of the heart, and Connie was the mother he had never had. "Daddy Richard," said Lily, using the title she had naturally adopted over the years, "are you happy?" Richard picked her up, observing the guests who included employees of the construction company, families who had benefited from the company's social programs, and true friends he had discovered after he stopped worrying about social status. "Happier than I ever imagined possible," he answered honestly. "Even after everything that happened with Eleanor." Richard looked into the girl's intelligent eyes, seeing in them not only the child she was, but the strong and wise woman she would become. "Especially because of everything that happened with Eleanor," he said. "Because that's what brought me you and Grandma, and that's what taught me that true wealth is not in what we have, but in who we love and who loves us back." Lily smiled and hugged him tightly. "I love you, Daddy Richard." "I love you too, my brave little one, forever." And as the sun set over Greenwich, Richard knew that he had found something that no lie could destroy and no crime could steal. A true family, built on honesty, love, and the courage of a child who had risked everything to save the people she loved. If you liked this video, please subscribe to my channel. I promise to bring you everyday videos that will make your life happier. Comment what you thought of my story, giving a score from 0 to 10, and thank you very much.